So the name that I came across for this effect describes this trick pretty well, and it's called the direct transposition. It's a very simple effect and just uses two cards. Oops, sorry. So in this case it'll be very easy to remember. You just have to remember a red 3 will go onto the right packet, and the black 3 goes onto the right packet. Just a little snap, and you'll notice that those cards change places. And of course over here is the red 3. So talking about this effect a little bit, this was something that I thought I came up with. I knew the idea couldn't have been mine completely, but what really convinced me that this had been done before is seeing a performance video of Ed Marlo doing this effect. This had to have been back early 70s at least. If you want the description for that video, which I really highly suggest that you look at, it's just a bunch of clips of him performing these effects, and this is one among them. I'll leave the link down below in the description. And having said that, Ed Marlo had called this the direct transposition. Now the idea of it pretty much is a Tenkai palm. I'm not really going to talk about the Tenkai palm a whole lot and what you can do with it. I'm sure you'll be able to play around with it and see what you can do with it. Perhaps later on I'll make a video on it, but the core move of this is the Tenkai palm. Now, you can see the differences between mine and his version. It's not any big difference. Like I said, the move that is used is exactly the same. There's just some little subtleties with placing the cards down and where I move my hands, and so that's not really much of a difference. But other than that, I think the best way to explain this is give you an angle of the exposed view and kind of talk you through what's happening, and then we'll go over everything a lot slower and in a lot more detail. So having said that, let's take a look at this trick from the absolute wrong angle. So like I said, this is the exposed angle, and we'll go over how to cover this angle a little better, but if you're already familiar with the Tenkai palm, you'll know that the left side, if you're right-handed, is going to be the weak angle of this. There are some things that you could do, and we'll go over that in a little bit. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to split the pack like this, and I like to pull one card off of each pack. Now this time I happen to get two of the same color. Something that I like to do is make sure I get an alternate color, just because it makes it a lot easier to follow. You don't really have to remember that it's a spade or if it's a 6 really. This way you can just say the black card and the red card. Much easier to remember. So what happens here is that I grab it at this upper left-hand corner. And the reason that I do that is so that when I place the card down, I can get a nice audible flick of the card as I put it down. And explaining this a little more, what I do is I really place the card down on this packet, and immediately I bring my hand back. Now you could say that this is called the feint, which is really just getting them used to the idea that I place a card down and I move my hand back. And what that does is that makes this steal of a card look exactly the same. Because now that I place this card on the left-hand pack, I make that same flick, but instead of leaving it on this pack, it goes right back into the Tenkai palm. So now the card is here, which should be here, and if you really wanted to, you can square the cards up if you're careful with your angles. And you can do a snap or whatever magical gesture you want to do that makes whatever this is happen. And you're going to make it seem like you're pulling this top card off, but what you're really going to do is just pull this card off. Sorry about that. So all you do is you come directly over this packet like you're going to grab the corner here, and you can even drop it down and then lift up like this. And as I point to the card like this, that's when I do the steal of the top card here, And I like to bring my hand back just because I don't want to have to quickly point here and then go here and do this. That seems a little rushed and suspicious. So as I point to this card, I bring it back, and then I go and do the same thing with this card. And that's really all there is to it. Basically, when you grab the card, you're going to grab it where there is no pip. So you'll notice when you grab the card here, there's either this pip here, you just grab on the opposite side. And I grab onto it with my 2 fingers here and my thumb in the back. And what I do is when I place the card down, and you'll notice that grabbing it here, as I place it down, it's naturally covered by my hand, which also helps make the steel look just the same. So as it gets placed right over the pack like this, with your index finger and still holding it with the thumb and the middle finger, you're just going to pull up on that card and let it flick against the pack. Now remember, this card you're actually going to place down on here, or this card, sorry. And you flick and immediately come back. Just pull your hand back away and rest. And you pause for a little beat, and then you come over and do the same thing with this card on the other pack. And again, it's exactly the same thing. You do the little snap, and as you do that, it's a very easy thing to do. You'll just have to try it. The card is going to be contacted by all your fingers when you turn it down like this. So as soon as you make that flick and you go back, my ring finger will just kind of curl in naturally, and that puts it right into the Tenkai palm. And if you don't know how to do the Tenkai palm, it is held roughly around this area of the palm and your thumb. Now it doesn't really matter where you hold the thumb in this case. Some people like to hold it very far back and make sure they can move this joint. For this, it doesn't really matter just because your hand is on the table and it's going to be relaxed and curled like this. So as long as you have it clipped between the thumb here and the palm here, and make sure that your fingers are closed so you don't get any gaps, you'll be completely covered on this. So going back to this point, if you place the card, flick it, and as you go back, just this movement of coming back will help cover any finger flutter of putting the card in this palm. So now you still have this card in the Tenkai palm behind here. Do whatever magical gesture you want, and it's a very easy thing to do, to just come over like this. So I still have the card, and you want to come over to the point where the card is exactly over the deck. And I usually almost drop the card. I'll at least contact the back of this card here on the packet, so that when I reach my fingers towards this upper corner here, it looks like I'm just pulling that card off of the pack. So it should look like I'm reaching in the corner and pulling it there. So you do that for one, like this. Now I usually use my middle finger to tap the card like this, just because that lets my finger or my hand hover right over this pack, and I need to steal this top card. Now this is probably going to be the hardest part of the entire trick, and that's just having a light enough grip, and it goes right into the Tenkai, just like this, and that's it. You don't need to worry about having it in a perfect spot, especially for this one. So as I pretend to flip this card over and I point, at that point my hand is, the palm is directly over this side where it needs to be, and the thumb is directly over on this side, which if you use a gentle enough grip, you should be able to easily pull off one card as you're tapping this. And like I said, at this point I don't like to tap this, gesture to it, and then immediately come over and do the same fake reveal. What I like to do is I tap this, and then I come back and rest, so that they register that this card used to be on this packet. And now I come over and I do the same exact thing, I place the card on top of the pack just slightly, and I lift it off the same way. The left card, for me, gets placed first onto this side. So it goes like this, and I flick, and I come back. And then I do the same thing for this card, flick, except this time the card gets stolen into the Tenkai position. So I'll do that one more time, just like that. And you can do whatever moment you want to have done. And as I come over, I let the back of this card touch this pack, and I don't drop it just because I want to make sure that I don't fumble trying to get one card. So I just let it touch on the back here, and I move my thumb from here, and I slide it over, and now I can pinch it with my index and thumb as I move it forward. Now you don't want to keep too much of a gap, maybe 1.5 inches, an inch is good, because when you tap the card here, the palm happens to be in exactly the right position to steal that card into Tenkai. So as I do the reveal and I tap a couple of times, and that's when I gently lift up on a card and I come back and I have the card stolen. And then it's the same exact thing of touching the back of this and pretending to turn the card over. So I'll do everything at speed one more time. Here we go. The 8 goes here, and my hand comes back. And the 6, same thing, and it gets stolen. Snap. Pretend to take this card and pull it off. Sorry about that. And I got 2 cards. So again, you don't have to make sure you perfectly get 1 card. That is preferable. But if you happen to do what I did, and I'll do it again on purpose here, when I tapped and I lifted up, I accidentally got 2 cards. And that's not a huge problem. Don't worry about it if you do, because the thing that I do, or you can do, is when you come back, I drop those cards. I drop them all. Even if you pick up 3 or 4, you don't want to have to fumble and drop the packet and then try and get 1 card again. You don't want any hesitation there. So just take all those cards, however many you grab, and just drop them there. And then you can just use your thumb and your index to peel a card forward so that you only get 1, and it should look exactly the same. So that's just in case any accident happens like that. Now, we'll talk a little bit about the angles and kind of making them a little bit better. Basically, the angle that is not going to work is obviously a very high up angle, just because if they're too high up, you'll see the card flash over here. And for me, since I'm right-handed, my left-hand side is going to be the worst angle. So if I have the card in Tenkai palm, at some point to the left, this card will be visible. What I saw Marlo do, and I had the same idea, but I don't particularly like the look of it, but if you have to do it, this will really help. Instead of having the cards directly head-on to the person, audience, whatever it is, whoever it is you're performing to, just tilt the cards a little towards the bad angle. And what that makes you do is turn your body, and of course that kind of shifts the angles. Instead of being visible from here, you know, a certain area here, it changes that angle to be further this way. So really it gives you a wider angle over here. And the reason I don't like that is because it's just a little strange to be doing this effect and you're very much at an angle. It really does help with the Tenkai, and that's something you can do, but overdoing this just makes it look a little awkward. So that's one thing you can do. So instead of having something like this straight on of an angle, I do like to have a little bit of an angle. Not so much that it's making my whole body turn so much, but just enough to where my arm has to turn a little bit. But again, that just depends on how you handle cards and how you handle things. So that's one way for the angles to be dealt with. Other than that, there's not really much to say about this. It's a pretty simple effect, pretty quick, so it's nothing I would really do alone. Either some ideas you could do with it are follow this with an effect, or, you know, after a certain effect, do this to maybe show some kind of simplified version of whatever technique you're using. Again, an example would be maybe you do some kind of invisible palm routine, and then after that you want to show them kind of a very simplified, direct version of that, and then you go into this effect, and it's a very quick thing. Or, again, you could do this first and then show them a little more of a complex idea using the same method, and go into something like the invisible palm, or, you know, you could go into a bunch of different things with this. But personally, I don't think this would be something you'd want to do just by itself. Now, I want to emphasize a few points on this. It's very important, at least for me, when you are in this position and you do the card, the little flick here, as you place it down, it's very important to get a very loud flick. Not very loud, but just make sure that it can be heard. And it's more important that you bring the hand back, because when you do the steal, you need to bring the hand back so that your angles are covered, basically. Because it's a very natural look to just have your hands curled onto the table like this. You don't want to do an action where you place the card here and then you move your hand to the side like this, and then for some reason when you go here, do the steal, your hand comes back like this. You want to make those two actions the same so that they'll never even suspect it. And I'm just going to run through it one more time so that you can see it from a proper angle. The queen gets placed onto this pack, the hand moves back. Then this card goes over here, and the hand moves back. The card is stolen. Do whatever gesture you want. Place the card onto the pack just slightly and lift up. And then as you point, that's when the steal is made. Just do this a couple of times. You don't want to have to really point to the card like this. Just very gently, 1-2 taps. Come back as you steal the card, and then come back and turn the card over again.